Badger fans, we have to talk about the best program at the University of Wisconsin right now.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day. Thank you for being here, as always. Really do appreciate you. My name is Ryan Herrings. I'm the host, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. And I'm excited for this. We're going to have a new segment. We're going to talk about some of the other sports that we don't always cover, but quite frankly, some of the best programs at the University of Wisconsin: hockey, volleyball, men's, women's. We're going to get into all that. We have a special guest coming on. Grace Cannizzo is going to help us kind of just talk about all these other sports that, quite frankly, deserve a lot more recognition than they get. We're going to start women's hockey. Women's hockey is an absolute wagon. Scoring about 5.5 goals per game, giving up about 1. 6 of the top 10 goal scorers in the conference are Badgers. Grace, tell me about this women's hockey team.
Yeah, this is just a great team to start with. They're number one in the nation. Really, them and Ohio State have dominated the past couple of years. Speaking of which, they recently battled out with Ohio State, who is ranked number 2. In the first time that they met up, they split the first series. However, recently, first game, so exciting for Badger fans, 6-0 victory, which is, again, unbelievable and really made it seem like no team was even close to them if you're beating the number 2 team in the nation 6-0. However, the second game, 3-3, and so they still went away with a point, but Ohio State did win in the shootout. But still, if you can beat, it shows, I think, really their capabilities. If you can beat the number 2 team 6-0, even though the second game went to a draw. I mean, the talent's unbelievable. You have players like Harvey who have played for the United States team. Same with Laila Edwards. So there's just endless talent there.
Yeah, I made the point in the opening, and I'm curious to get your take on this. I don't even think it's a point of discussion. The Badgers women's hockey team is the best team in the university right now. That's the best team in Madison.
Yeah, absolutely. So they started not number 1 in the country. I believe they were like 2, 3. However, after a few games this season, they became number 1 and have been number 1 straight through. It's really hard to argue they're not the best program right now if they've been number 1 pretty much this whole season, minus a couple of weeks. It's hard to argue.
Yeah, talk to me. I know you hit on a couple players. Obviously, Harvey is leading the team in plus-minus, or with a plus-minus rating of plus 44. Incredible defensive player, defenseman who also has the ability to score. Who are some other key names on this team that Badger fans need to know about?
Yeah, and I think that's also a great point to say key names. There isn't just one. Harvey, great. She's not the only name you need to know because this is really a team effort that there's a bunch of Badger players such as Laila Edwards, who leads the team in goals, 19 goals. Lacey Eden, third with 17, and that's in the conference, the WCHA. Third in the conference is Lacey Eden. First is Laila Edwards. And Casey O'Brien, another great name to talk about. She's one of the 4 players in the WCHA to average at least 1 assist per game. Might I add, all 4 of the players to average that are all Badger players. So in first is Casey O'Brien, then following Harvey, Laila Edwards, and Kirsten Sims. I also think it's so important to mention that, this Badger team is dominant. So you think, goaltenders might not have to do as much. That might not be kind of as big of a thing. But honestly, I would argue the complete opposite. Goaltender Ava McNaughton leads the WCHA in goal saving percentage with .951, which is incredibly impressive. So it's not like other teams aren't getting shots off. Of course, Badger has a very strong defense, so they're letting less shots. However, they're still getting a decent amount of shots against them, and Ava McNaughton has been great savior for them in many instances.
Yeah, and you look at the award trackers, like where certain awards are going to, and it's like projected winner, Badger. It's like the top 3, 4 player of the year, conference player of the year. They're all just Badgers. Outside of an occasional Ohio State player, Buckeye, this team is just, like you said, absolutely loaded. I want to shift gears to the men's team. The men's team's kind of interesting. Started 2-8, and since then it's been a lot of close games, several one-goal losses. What can you tell us about the men's hockey team right now?
Yeah, so I think you look at the men's team, 9-12-1 overall, and you're like, all right, that's not great. However, they have played 14 games, so 7 series against ranked opponents, including twice against Michigan State. I'll get back to that point, but also 6 of their losses have been in overtime. So this Badger team isn't getting blown out and losing and losing and losing. They're keeping it close, and they're keeping it close against Michigan State, the number 1 team. So they've played them in 2 series. They put up a fight, split the first series with the loss being in overtime and their win being a 4-0 victory. I was working at the 4-0 victory and everyone was going insane because it's the number 1 team. And they dropped the second series, but they only lost by 1 goal in each game. They were both 3-4. So again, this Badger team can compete with the best. However, they are struggling on getting those late goals or recovering from them, I should say, as well.
What's next for both these teams? What's coming up let's start with women's hockey. What's next for women's hockey?
Yeah, so both teams are actually playing tonight. Wisconsin women's hockey is playing at St. Thomas, so that's in Minnesota, tonight at 7 p.m. Central Time, and that's January 17th. January 18th, tomorrow, 3 p.m. at St. Thomas. Men are playing at home, LIU, tonight, 7 p.m. So a little bit of a conflict there if you're a fan of both teams. And tomorrow at 6 p.m.
Great stuff. We're going to take a quick second, come back, talk about a star on the Badgers women's basketball team that I don't know if a lot of Badgers are familiar enough with. That's coming up next on Locked On Badgers. But first, a quick break for our friends of the show and a quick second to say thank you to everybody tuning in. Also, definitely a chance to say thank you to Grace for coming in and kind of helping us out with this segment I'm really excited for, which is also going to cover volleyball when it's in season. I think it's going to be something that's a lot of fun to celebrate all the other sports at Wisconsin. Today's episode brought to you by our good friends over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best daily fantasy platform that you can find. Injury insurance in case you lose a guy to an injury, which is awesome for me because I always run into that injury bad luck with fantasy teams. Prize Picks takes care of that. It's just you against the numbers, plus or minus more than 2 categories. More touchdowns on this one, less receiving yards on that one. It's super simple. Daily fantasy made easy. Prize Picks helps you really remove a lot of the stress of these season-long fantasy sports that require too much time, and you're playing against ringers, people that have like 1,000 teams and read every fantasy football magazine or basketball magazine there is. Who has time for that? Not me, not you. That's what Prize Picks is here for. Prize Picks, download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your $5 lineup. That's $50 instantly after you play your $5 lineup with code LOCKEDONCollege. Prize Picks, run your game. Today's episode also brought to you by our great friends over at FanDuel. And what a time to get involved with FanDuel. NFL playoffs are going to be coming up pretty soon, are here. College football playoffs have one more game coming up. NBA is going on. College basketball is going on. FanDuel is incredibly easy. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going over at FanDuel. It's easy to navigate. Variety of bets, futures, parlays, teaser spreads. It's all there. Visit FanDuel.com to join today. Get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make the playoff season unforgettable. FanDuel, the official sportsbook of the NFL. All right, let's get back into this with Grace. And again, really do appreciate Grace jumping in. This is something I'm really excited for, and I'm glad that she's able to help me through some of this. Let's talk women's basketball. Hot start for the team. They've been in a bit of a struggle. Although some of these teams recently, Maryland was 8th in the country. Ohio State was 9th in the country. I want to start here, though, with Serah Williams. What kind of player is Serah, and what does she bring to the court?
Yeah, anytime I talk about women's basketball with anyone, the first name that comes up, and deservedly so, is Serah Williams. I mean, let me just throw out a few stats here. She's one of few players and one of the first and earliest in career, only a junior, to hit 1,000 points. She leads the Big Ten in blocks. She's 5th in the conference in points per game with 18.5, 2nd in Big Ten for offensive rebounds, and 1st in the conference for all rebounds. I mean, that's just unbelievable, and I think it tests to a great player that she is. But the other thing I want to say is that we talk about these great players, great athletes, and something about all of these teams we've discussed is how well-rounded they are. While you have Serah Williams, who's undeniably great, you have Natalie Lightsinger, who's great at the line, shooting a 5'8", 5'7", Carter McRae, She's accurate and aggressive. 7th in the Big Ten, both for field goal percentage and defensive rebounds per game. Ronnie Porter, 5th in the conference in assists. So it's unfortunate to see how they've struggled recently, not able to come away with these wins you want to see. However, there's so much talent on this Badger team, undeniably.
Yeah, and I was actually watching some of that Maryland game down the stretch, and that was a game they were right in it up until that last probably about 6-minute stretch where Maryland just took over. It feels like they're closer than they were in the last several years. Does it feel like this program, because now you're in the midst of a 6-game losing streak, you got into Big Ten play, but it still feels like they're closer. How should fans look at this program that has historically struggled at Wisconsin?
Exactly. I think this is also like a theme with football, our football team and our football program. Is you say, hey, we're not in the top 10 in the country. And it's like, of course we're not. Like, look at the team last season. And a lot of people just expect results right away, but that's not realistic. This team has absolutely improved, and we've done great with transfers. Carter McRae, who I mentioned, Tess Myers coming in, have done big numbers for the Badgers. So I think you have to look at this Badger team not and how they are in the country, and not beating the number 9 team, but how they played against the number 9 team last night, Ohio State, and how they've improved and kept the score close for a while. Definitely fell off a little bit in the end, which is understandable, because once they were not able to keep the lead, it just became more difficult, losing momentum. However, they were in that game for a long time.
Yeah, one of the things I look at when I look at the Badgers the women's basketball team is turnovers are a little bit of an issue. They're 274th in the country in turnover percentage. Do you think that's related to the level of competition that's gotten better, or is it more they just maybe don't have that true point guard on the roster right now?
I think it's could be a combination of both. However, I just think this is something that this specific team has struggled a lot with. We get excited with a steal and then maybe throw a poor pass, allowing one back. Serah Williams, I talked about how great she is. Phenomenal player. The one thing I'll say is she has 3.1 turnovers per game, which is not great. Excellent player, and everyone has their faults. That's Serah Williams, and that's something this team has been really struggling with, and I think they often get too excited. But yeah, you can turn and say it's both maybe a combination of factors with this team and this program. But yeah, that's definitely one of the spots that they're doing great, and they're shooting these threes, and field goal percentage is great. But when it comes to turning away these opportunities, that's something they certainly need to work on.
And I'll finish on this one with Serah Williams, and I'm curious your thoughts on this. When you watch her play, she kind of reminds me a little bit of Steven Crowell on the men's side, where they'll throw it into the post, and she's really patient, really, really good. If they double her, she finds the shooter on the opposite wing. Like, she really is kind of the pivot point of that entire offense. Would her game be showcased even more with a little more talent around her? It almost feels like she has to do too much.
No, I completely understand that. And I think something that the team has slightly improved on, but still can work on, as from last year, is 3-point shooting. They average maybe 6 3-point shots per game, not a great statistic. And once you have more depth on that team in that way, and you can launch one up to Serah Williams, she'll catch it pretty tall. But you can also switch things up and, I don't know, drive in with a good screen by yourself or take a 3. I think it's more the versatility that the team is looking for. And Serah Williams, of course you want to throw it to her. Of course you want her to have the ball as much as possible because she's excellent. However, can you fit those other gaps where an open 3 is not just going to be missed?
Right. No, that's well said. She is Grace. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you, Grace, for jumping in on this. Something I'm excited to get going for sure. On Wisconsin, make sure when you're done here, go check out Locked On Big Ten. All the latest stories on the Big Ten Conference, from football playoffs to transfer portal, all that's happening on our Locked On Big Ten channel. Go check that out next. On Wisconsin, and we will talk later.